What's up, guys? Connor OHanlon here for the first time in a very long time for the Greater Society podcast. We are in a new room. I might have a little echo in here. Who knows? I don't know. I didn't plan any of this. I didn't think of organizing anything other than listen, now's the time to come back. So we're going to talk about a little bit of what I've been doing, where I've been at, why I haven't been doing this for a little while. And then we're going to be talking about the elephant in the room, or the donkey in the room, I suppose, with the current situation regarding the Biden campaign. And then lastly, we're going to be diving into some millennial and Generation Z stuff, more specifically, kind of dovetailing nicely with a lot of the project that I am working on, or have been working on for a number of years at this point, but is finally coming to fruition. But an article really spurred my, inclination to dive into it today. So, with all of that being said, thank you for joining. If you guys are watching live, if you guys are listening, I'm excited to get something out for the first time in a very long time. I will briefly, and as briefly as I guess I can, because you guys know, if you've listened to the show, I'm pretty verbose, go over some of the stuff that has happened since we've last gone live, more specifically in my life, and developing outside of what was this podcast and this show. So number one, and this is what I was alluding to in the dovetailed part, is my book, Building a Greater Society, Guide to Political Revolution for Millennials and Generation Z, is coming this fall. It is currently in the revision state, so it is not available yet. It is not available right now for pre-order, but it will be very, very soon. And those who joined me for my pre-sale are now going to get signed copies of the books. They're going to get access to a bonus mini ebook and all that stuff, which, ultimately everybody here will have access to, given some time, and be able to pay for some of that stuff. But that will be coming very, very soon. Ideally, I'm hoping that the publisher can help me get it out earlier than expected, but it is expected to come out prior to the election, which is good. Second, I finished my master's degree in public administration in May, and that has been a pretty big weight off my shoulders. It wasn't a major contributing factor for why I paused the podcast for the time being, but a little overload and burnout. I would say I should have said like why I stopped for a little while, but the main reason why I stopped for a little while of doing this stuff was just the generic burnout of dealing with a lot of different moving pieces, and this being one of the easier ones that were maybe adding a little bit of strain for spinning my wheels a little bit without gaining traction as quickly as I wanted to. Whereas I still had to do school, I still had to do my real job, I still had to do all these other things, right? And I still had to serve on different boards, and still had to run the party, which I will come back to in a second too. But honestly, now I have a Substack that I will also be doing a write up about some of this stuff for this week, in conjunction. So the show is not going to be weekly moving forward. It is going to kind of be like an as needed basis, which typically is going to be once a month where I see fit when I go live. Now that could be more than once a month, and if you guys are super into it, that's great. If not, you also don't have to watch or listen. But ideally, you guys are here for not just to hate. So that would be great. You guys can also check out my social media channels. I also just wanted to shout out the TikTok page that I'm trying to get to 1,000 followers so I can concurrently stream on TikTok and reach a younger audience that might not be here on YouTube, might not see my stuff on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. So if you guys have a TikTok account, go over there. It's at Connor OHanlon. Give it a follow. So that way we can do the live streams. I'd have the phone right in front of me while I do this anyway, and just kind of engaging different people that way. Going back to the chair role has been interesting because many of you guys were following along into the 2023 elections, and that, again, another part of my life that just was burning me out with a lot of this realm. And the 2023 school board election in particular in Central Bucks. So, you know, for those who are not aware, and I almost did a special, like, oh, just come back for this and talk about it. But in 2023, the radical Republicans on the school board were defeated finally by the 5 candidates that I helped train. Of course, they did, the vast majority of legwork. It is worth stating, though, that I did help. I was on their calls, I helped train them, all that stuff. So the 5 candidates in Central Bucks flipped the school board, and then 2 of the Republicans then further resigned after that. Now there was a 7-1, 7-1, no, 8-1, 8-1 majority. So big flip there. In Doylestown Township, which I had written an op-ed about in the Bucks County Beacon, we flipped Doylestown Township for the first time in Doylestown Township's history. And recall that if you guys know any of my history in running for office, whatnot, I lost that race in 2019 by a whopping 38 votes. So being able to finally flip that as the chair, it is a big weight off my back. It is something that I can be proud of, and I think that everybody is proud of for doing. And something that I didn't have a hand in, but just interesting of note, was that we also flipped other school boards here in Bucks County. Obviously, the work from the ground up builds to holding the county commissioner seats, which is very vital. I will just give them a shout out too, because they had helped me about 2 weeks ago. Not me directly, but the organization, one of the organizations that I'm a part of, NAMI, which, if you guys aren't aware of what NAMI does, it's the National Alliance of Mental Illness, Bucks County. It is one of the largest, if not the largest, I believe it is the largest mental health service provider for Bucks County. Provides tons and tons and tons and tons of services for people that are suffering with mental illness, dealing with anxiety, depression. It gives them support groups, suicide prevention, all these different things. The people over there do such great work, and I'm a very proud member of the board of directors. But sometimes money problems happen, and the county commissioners really helped us last 2 weeks. So again, good reason as to electing good people, good governance gets things done. I believe that is largely what has been happening over the last 10 months for me. I got a little puppy. Not going to be in this stream because he wouldn't sit still. So he is downstairs. But maybe eventually, if you guys want to, you guys can get him on the stream. He can give his political takes. But for right now, he is downstairs. Yeah, so as usual, if you guys are watching live, you can always throw questions or comments in the chat. I don't see anything so far, but you guys are more than welcome to do that. And I will keep chugging along as there is some important stuff going on. There is no moving forward. This is something I'm trying to approach with everything in my life, is less rigidity. So I'm not fixating myself to doing an hour or doing whatever. Just going to roll with it. If I go an hour, I go an hour. If I go 30 minutes, I go 30 minutes. I want to give you content that I feel is important, but also, again, this isn't my structured, way of talking and teaching and all. This is just kind of takes, interactions, all that different stuff. Upcoming, though, and I will give you more specifics as things progress, there will be a course that I will be developing on my new website, which the new website will be launching very soon as well, associated with political organizing, political activism, running for office if you're interested in that, and everything that kind of goes in that umbrella. It'll be your 101 kind of course, and we'll be going into other different avenues too of developing yourself if you that wants to get involved further with the system, which again is why it's really important to help me get those folks on TikTok, because I think that the Generation Z and the millennial generation, we are the future, but we're also the present. We cannot keep saying, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Like, it is time now to take action, get involved, take the reins of power for what that's worth, and really implement the policies that we want, utilize the power and influence that we have as a block. We are the largest voter block, which I think people forget, millennials specifically, but millennials and Gen Z, young voters, we have a significant influence on this. And we can change the course of history, and I think we need to. And talk about that here in a second as to our options. But for what it's worth, young people are going to and are necessary to better this country, and otherwise have it slip to the authoritarian right. Project 2025, which again, I find it interesting to see it spiking now. We had talked about this about 9 or 10 months ago, right before my hiatus. Project 2025 from the Heritage Foundation being such a vital piece of the news now. I think John Oliver just did a piece on it. It's on and all the time. People are talking about it left and right. Joe Biden talked about it in the debate. It's out there, and now Trump is acting like it's ridiculous. We all know knows what it is, but that is what it is. Now, let me take a sip of Gatorade because it is brutally hot. If you guys are somehow watching not in the East Coast or Jersey, Pennsylvania, it is extremely hot, and I'm sweating bullets while I'm doing this. So now onto the meat and potatoes of this program. And I sigh because I am not loving where our political system finds us right now. Okay? That is probably where most young people feel. That is probably where most people. Now, the debate happened almost 2 weeks ago. And I kind of thought, oh, it's going to be inconsequential. It's just going to be a debate. Like, I always watch this stuff anyway. I used to love watching presidential primary debates, specifically with the Democratic Party, but also at the time, 2016, with the Republicans. I thought they were very interesting. I thought that they brought unique takes into the differentiation between the candidates at the time. I don't think that there was much differentiation at the time, and I definitely don't think there are now, especially like the 24 primary was just a joke for the Republicans. But there wasn't a primary for the Democrats. There really wasn't one, which is arguably a pretty significant critique right now. And it is important to note, I didn't mention this actually. I should have mentioned this up front, but like in the last 10 months, like I did meet the president, right? Some people want to think that I have some divine intervention that can allow me to flex influence over the president or any sort of piece of government. I think people lack, and this is, I'm prefacing all of this to say, I think this is why it is so institutionally vital for us to get involved, because the powers of a political party are not like the machinations of like one person. It is not just like, oh, well, this person wants to do that, so X happens. There is no like, oh, Connor can influence the president or the senator or whoever. Like, I can theoretically, the same way though that everybody else can. Like, I may have met these people, but my voice is just as good as your voice, and my vote is the same as your vote. And there's been a presumption of further left people, honestly, that have pinned certain things to me or attributed certain things to me slash progressive slash anybody that has like an official role within the Democratic Party to being like traitors or being like sellouts to the party. You see this with AOC. People say this about AOC all the time. And it's frustrating because there is no alternative from them, right? There's never an alternative to say, okay, well, Connor, I disagree with the way that you're going about this with the Democratic Party. Thus, I'm creating this party, or I'm working with the Green Party, or I'm doing this electoral work. The activist left, and I'm saying this broadly, and not to dismiss the activist left, right? It's different than what I do with the electoral system. Sometimes, and I'm asterisking this because, again, this is not all the time, but sometimes shoots themselves in the foot. And I've talked about this with Cyril on the Bucks County Beacon podcast. I write about it in the book. Sometimes rhetoric really is the winner, right? We see this, and I'll keep hinting at, we're going to talk about the Biden situation, but a lot of this preface matters. Sometimes the rhetoric matters more than anything else, because the rhetoric is, oh, Joe Biden's demented, this, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like, do you know that? Do any of us know that? Have they been hiding things? By they, I do mean like that is like the they that is like close to the president, right? Well, here's the thing, right? I met the president. I met him 2 months ago, right? Could it be between now and then that things have gotten significantly worse? Yeah, it's very possible. It honestly seems that way. But to say, oh, I met him and between now and then, whatever happened, right? But Connor's just lying. He met him. He's a bad guy. He shook hands with the president. He said it was an honor to meet with him. But he's complacent in the Israeli-Gaza situation. Which, again, people come and attribute things to me about that, which I haven't even talked about really publicly, which then people just say, oh, well, then it means you're okay with it. Does not mean that I'm okay with it, right? All of this is to say, sometimes the rhetorical fight, the rhetorical battle on the front of, hey, I don't care what word you use. I don't care what, like, and of course, I don't mean just like, oh, you can use certain words, right? I'm saying in the sense of like, you don't have to pinpoint it to being like, well, is an example. In my book, I talk about this. Like, you don't have to call Medicare for All like a socialist program. Who cares if it's socialist, capitalist, social democrat, Lincoln Republican? Who cares about any of that stuff, right? The point is that it's good policy. And certain things that are good policy, sometimes you can rhetorically back into them. And that's all really important. Setting the narrative is really important. Progressives have seemingly, over the last year or so, maybe the last year and a half, which is doubly frustrating, continued to disrupt and dismantle our institutional power by underwriting people like AOC. And that's how you end up getting, someone like Jamal Bowman losing, which for whatever reasons he lost, because there are some people that, oh, he was going to lose anyway, whatever. But that's why Democrats always primary Summer Lee. They always primary Cori Bush. They always primary Rashida Tlaib. They always primary Ayanna Pressley. They always primary AOC, right? These same people, right? The progressive lane needs to figure out how to run primaries, how to do all this stuff separate from the moral righteousness and outrage that comes with the superiority that comes from like being on the outside. Because being on the outside, guess what? That means you lose. So I'm not okay with being on the outside. And if that means that being on the inside makes me a sellout, then I might be a sellout to you. But I can promise you that I'm advocating for the exact same policies that I was 4 or 5 years ago. My belief systems haven't changed, they've been refined. My approach is pragmatic, and that may be upsetting to some people. It is not pure, right? The purity of this purity test doesn't work, makes you a loser, right? And if you want to end what's going on in Gaza, whatever word you want to call it, some people call it a genocide, some people will call it mass killings. If you want to protect, Palestinians, and this is specifically dialed at, people further left than me, then have to get in the fight, right? Not physically, not actually taking up arms and doing that stuff, right? But you actually have to get pressure in the places that matter. And you also have to make arguments and rhetorically skillful moves. And I know this is like hard to sit with sometimes, but have to do that in a way that is pragmatic and practical. So if it is approaching somebody that, is what you would call, pro-Israel, whatever, like those people are good people too. And like when you start lumping everybody into the same group of people or the same group and you paint with a broad brush, that's where you're going to get into at least the accusations of the horseshoe theory, right? Which I think is a lot of it is kind of BS, but there are those people that go all the way back around. All of this is prefacing to say that Joe Biden did not face a legitimate primary. And that is because, one, incumbents are extremely hard to primary. 2020, Trump didn't face a Republican primary, right? Parties don't do that functionally. Number two, primarying a sitting president that honestly has done an extremely good job. I will take out the Israeli Palestinian conflict. I will take that out, right? I will grant that I disagree with the handling of that. I don't like it. There's a million different ways that we can talk about that, right? Taking that aside, because again, acknowledging the fact that if Donald Trump was president right now, it would be significantly worse. Acknowledging that if Donald Trump is elected, it will get worse is a reality. But Joe Biden has been domestically and in some foreign policy ways, like the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which, yes, although the actual implementation of the withdrawal kind of bungled, the actual withdrawal is good. You can talk about the PACT Act, the CHIPS Act, the parts of the Build Back Better that went back in, which, bipartisan infrastructure package, legislation that spans across every issue, capping, which again, I'm catching myself up with a lot of like mythological arguments, people that theoretically are arguing with me on Twitter or in person or whatever. So I apologize for the scatterbrain, but it is important to note that you should also, as much as people want to chastise politicians for doing bad things, you should also cheer them on when they do good things. Because that's how they know it is positive reinforcement. That's how they know they're doing good things. Some people want to say, well, they're Democrats, that's what they should do. I agree. But when Democrats do good things, you should applaud them and encourage them to do more good things. Because when they're not, when they're not rewarded and applauded in the job, and I'm not saying, oh, give them money, whatever. Like, do that if you want, right? Give them donations, whatever. But like, at least saying you support these things that they're doing publicly is good. Because if you don't, then they assume that nobody cares. Nobody's paying attention. And if nobody's paying attention, nobody gives a shit, then they're just going to do whatever they think that people are paying attention to, because that's their job. And I think some people forget that politicians are supposed to respond to the public. That is quite literally their job. So, there was no primary of Joe Biden. It is hard to describe and have this conversation without acknowledging that first. Because if there was a legitimate primary opponent, because I have news to break to you, if you're on the left, like Marianne Williamson was not a serious contender. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is a joke. And Cornel West is running as an independent, and then he's changing his party like 4 times. Like, I like Cornel West, but if he doesn't win, if you cannot beat somebody in a primary, which again is extremely hard, I want to emphasize how hard that is. Like, if you try to primary like your sitting congressman, like, it is hard. If you try to primary like your sitting city council member, it is very hard, unless you just are extremely well known, which, it happens. It is extremely underrated how hard some of this stuff is to do. So that is why you build the institutional power during the times of like, well, the Democrats are doing pretty good things. Like, now the progressives should be like building our base. We should be, bolstering ourselves. Get ready for when we can get a new congressman, get a senator, get a presidential candidate. So, and I said this, I think I said this like probably over a year ago at this point, but like at the time, because I want to point out that I stopped doing programs prior to October 7th. So at the time, definitely, I was, this is the president. He's doing a decent job, even though he said he would only do 1 term. He is going to run again. Then he's the presumptive nominee, and it is going to be hard and likely a waste of time, money, effort, and a potentially political suicide for anybody that tries to challenge him for the presidency. Like, let's just say Ro Khanna tried to do it, right? Like, Ro Khanna's a great politician. I like Ro Khanna. Or like, let's say even Josh Shapiro, who's a little bit more centrist. I love Josh Shapiro too. And again, you can have political disagreements with people and still think that they're good politicians, still like them, because I'm to Josh Shapiro's left on certain things. Like, that means that I can talk with him. I can have these conversations. I can vote for people that will put up these things in the state house, all these things, right? But for anybody that tried, they'd likely lose 99% to 1. And if you're okay with that, those odds, then have at it. But it buries them for the future too, which is, again, maybe you don't care about that. But as somebody that is concerned about the bench of the Democratic Party, and specifically more the progressive movement, it is important not to just be like, yep, well, here's a sacrificial lamb. Here's Jill Stein again, which, like, Jill Stein's not a good candidate. That is the parts on running a primary. Like, if progressives did, were able to knock him off, whatever, so be it. There is not a politician that was popular enough at the time on the progressive left that could have done it, and now would have been like, woohoo, go for it, right? Like, if Bernie did it, Bernie would not have beaten Joe Biden in a primary. As much as, like, I'd love to see a Sanders 2024 campaign, right? Like, Bernie is too old at this point, but like, that would be cool. Love to be able to vote for, the first Jewish American president. I'd love to get the first, real progressive candidate in there, since LBJ on certain things, but FDR as well, right? Like we think that Joe Biden's done a good job in some cases on domestic policy. Well, the reason is he's been doing that because of pressure from the progressive left. Like that's where it comes from. Getting real good policy from Democrats because of the campaign like Bernie, because of people like Elizabeth Warren, because of those people that exist in the ether that do the good work day in and day out. Okay. The debate happens. I thought it was going to be, like I said, oh, run of the mill. It's just going to be another day of Connor OHanlon's life watching political debates. And people talk about it and then they forget. And boy, was I wrong. Because Joe Biden had a horrific debate where he stumbled over his words and he sounded significantly worse than when I met him. Which, again, that was my first tangent. But, like, I promise you, I met him. He was joking around, like he was jovial almost. And he was fine. Not the same on debate night. And he's had more of these slips, right? Mental slip. And to the point where a good portion of Democrats now have lost faith that he can win. And not only Democrats, but independents. And I want to tell you an anecdote. I won't use any names. But after the debate, it happened on Thursday night, I went to the gym at Friday morning at which I normally go to at 6 a.m. And in the span of the 1 hour class, 3 people of the 14 that were in it asked me, what are we going to do? Are you or they going to replace Biden? Again, people misconstrue that I have some certain ability to replace Biden. I don't. But that's concerning. And it should be concerning. Especially if it was a day after and it was the morning after. So it was before the New York Times said anything, before all these other places came out and saying this, before any Democratic Congress people came out, before all of that. This is the morning after. I'm telling you, that was my wake up call. Like, I didn't think it was, I thought it was bad. I didn't watch any like news coverage after. I didn't watch anything after. I watched it. It was the day I actually got my puppy, so I was a little spacey on the details. And I watched it back and like, oh yeah, that was bad. That was okay. But literally sitting in the gym, warming up, and I go, fuck, we're in trouble. And I am not saying this in any way that is like we have to replace Joe Biden. Because I don't know that is the answer. I don't know that it's clear that is the answer. And anybody I think that says, oh, it's so obvious we can win with X person, I don't think you can say that in good faith, believe it, and say, yep, we got it. But I also don't think that you can say, oh, yeah, 100%. And friends of mine have asked me, let's just roll back the clock here, but friends have asked me in the past, like, what do you think the odds are of Joe Biden winning? Well, I think, with a good economy, a solid economy, seemingly doing decent things in many different facets of domestic policy, that he would get elected. It would be about a 60-40 dot, right? And every one of these elections is close now. And I live in Pennsylvania, I live in Bucks County, I live in the swing county of the swing state that we need to win. you know, people like, yeah, we don't want the craziness of Trump. And as more people would hear him, I would assume, yeah, it's going to get worse for Trump and better for Biden. Cool. But that's just not what has happened. And um, after the debate, it's gotten worse. So I want to, I'm going to pull up a few of the, why it's been a little while, so forgive me for my lack of finesse here. But well, I am struggling now, but here we go. Okay. Here we go. Sorry, folks. All right. A lot of my settings reset. So here we have Jon Favreau, who is not, this is not the MCU director, the Pod Save America guy, who, again, they were Obama people. So it is worth noting. This is um, polling data that suggested that this is a poll that suggests that people want to replace Biden as nominee. It says that 64% of all voters, 55% of black voters, 66% of Hispanic voters, and 48% of Biden voters want to replace Biden as the nominee. The poll continues that is Biden too old to be an effective president? 69% of all voters, 62% of black voters, 68% of Hispanic voters, and 55% of Biden voters. And they say this is from the New York Times pre-debate poll, which is concerning because this is before the performance, which had Trump up 48-42. This should be concerning, right? And again, this is not to say, oh, this is 100% the way that we have to replace Joe Biden. This is a sure because, and I'll come to my opinion on if we did that, what should happen. But here we have, and this is, I'm putting an asterisk next to it. This is one poll, but I can't pull up every poll that has gone on since this debate. But new general election poll from Emerson has Trump winning Pennsylvania by 5, Trump winning Georgia by 5, Trump winning Michigan by 1, Trump winning Arizona by 4, Trump winning Wisconsin by 3, Trump winning Nevada by 6. This is one poll. And again, people in the comments are saying, oh, this is a push poll. This is this is the other thing. It's not the only poll because I can pull up, I'll just go to the political polls Twitter page, like Morning Consult poll. Trump winning this is the national vote. Like this is the popular vote. 2 points for Trump, right? I think you go back like general election poll, Remington. That's a C plus. That's not worth. This is the Emerson one. Like you can go through these, right? The CNN poll that had it. Here we go. Here's a not as bad one. This says Trump winning Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, and Biden winning Wisconsin, Michigan, which again is not enough, right? That's a Morning Consult poll. Like I can go down these like one by one, right? So like this is it's not great. We have one where Trump is winning Arizona by 3, North Carolina by 3, Georgia by 1. Again, Georgia's maybe not like as important, but we have Trump winning Pennsylvania by 7 in this poll. Like this is concerning. This is red alert. This should be of mind. And I want to, before I go into Biden's response today, Important to note how this would happen. If the Democrats, putting that in quotes here, because again, what I'm about to say, but also there is not like one contingent of Democrats that like can do this, right? There's influence, there is conversations to be had, but if this were to happen, it would require President Joe Biden to step back. Important to note because of what I started with. There was no primary election. So Biden wins every one of the elections, right? Even the uncontested or uncommitted vote, right? Every single one of those delegates, functionally, I think every single went to Joe Biden. They are locked in the DNC. So even if the delegates now, which again we said it's at 48% of the of Biden voters want potentially somebody else, but even if that delegate doesn't support or doesn't want to have Joe Biden be the nominee, let's say they want Gretchen Whitmer, which isn't going to happen, but let's just say that was what they wanted. They can't just change. There's no mechanism for them to just change. Yeah, oh yeah, we were a Biden delegate, now I'm switching. Not how it works. In a second vote, that could happen. Or if, and this is the only way, President Biden were to step back and decide, I don't want to run, then there can be a contested primary, or not a contested primary, a contested convention. Unless, but again, asterisk, because this hasn't happened before, then they throw it and say, like, well, actually, we're going to have, like, some crazy one-day vote off, right? Which is unlikely. It would be most likely to go to the convention. The delegates would be, which again, you vote on your delegates, but delegates would then help pick the candidate. And ideally, that candidate would be the strongest candidate because they would get the most votes in a convention. But as of this morning, in his letter to congressional Democrats, which apparently they're supposed to be meeting tomorrow with him, or they're meeting with themselves. I don't fully understand the dynamic because they've been out of Washington for a while. I think they had at least 2 or 3 weeks off. But President Biden sends a letter to congressional Democrats with this message, quote, I am firmly committed to staying in this race, to running this race to the end, and to beating Donald Trump. The voters and the voters alone decide the nominee of the Democratic Party. How can we stand for democracy in our nation if we ignore our own party? Now, I don't know if he actually wrote all that. Probably not. But it's concerning to me, at least, to say, like, oh yeah, like the voters decide the nominee. I mean, yes, technically, but there really wasn't a primary, right? So you can't really, in good faith, and again, maybe they don't care, right? That is what it is. You can't really, in good faith, suggest that. And another, and this is just, I won't even pull up a tweet, but I'll just read the quote. But it says, because Joe Biden's favorite TV show, if you didn't know this, is Morning Joe, which not the best choice, but it is what it is. Until we can get him watching, or any president watching here, or any progressive show, it is what it is. When he called into MSNBC this morning, he said, quote, the bottom line here is we're not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. I'm getting so frustrated by the elites in the party. Then he said, run against me. Go ahead. Announce for president. Challenge me at the convention. The phrase, I'm getting so frustrated by the elite, is one of the, unfortunately, most ironic things for President Biden to say. He's being extremely defensive and extremely combative, which is not unifying. It is not showing, in my opinion, doesn't show strength. It doesn't bring people in. There's people. I don't know what can convince people that he is in good enough shape to run and do it, right? But it is my job as a party chair to get the Democratic candidate elected. And I will get Joe Biden elected any day of the week over Trump. I will get Kamala Harris. I will get Gavin Newsom. I will get Josh Shapiro. Not that I don't care, because I'm sure that there's some Democrat out there. Like, I won't get like Bob Menendez, but like, within reason, the Democratic candidate is going to be better than the Republican candidate for progressives and for the American people, but from the progressive point of view, right? So it is what it is. But if something were to happen in the next week, couple of days, week, 2 weeks, and he were to decide to step back, then what do I think would happen? Or what do I think should happen? I am of the belief, and I think this is hopefully a telling sign for other people that are paying attention. I'm of the belief that young people, progressives, and women, people of color, care that it would be Kamala Harris. And I say that because, being of my political ideology, roughly, Kamala Harris is not like the ideal candidate. Say that, right? Like, I could be like, let's pick Elizabeth Warren, let's pick, Bernie Sanders, or throw in Ayanna Pressley, right? Like, just some random. I mean, not that Ayanna Presley's random, but like, just you could just throw in some random progressive, like, that would be good. That's eligible. She's old enough, but no. Kamala Harris is the vice president. She has proven she can do the job. She is qualified as, and I will remind everybody, a former district attorney, a former attorney general, and a former senator, and now the sitting vice president. She was chosen for a reason. She was unifying for Joe Biden. He coalesced a big coalition with her, even though she was the originally person that went after her, or after him, I'm sorry. That contingency, or that contingent of the voting bloc within the Democratic Party, I don't think is okay with overlooking Kamala Harris, because she's a qualified woman. So what does that tell? What does that tell our voters? What does that tell our people? And she would be the first female president, first woman of color to be the president, and messaging wise, we could elect the first female president in the year. We are going to protect, enshrine reproductive rights from radical right wing, radical Republican Party that is trying to implement Project 2025, and Donald Trump, who wants to invade privacy, take away their autonomy, their own sovereignty over their own bodies. That is what is it. And I think the message sells itself. I think it's obvious that if this were to happen, she is the choice. That is coming from Bernie Bro number 452, right? It is, I think, telling to see the unification of young people. Again, young people, we are more pragmatic than people give us the benefit of the doubt for. We are the reason that Democrats won Senate in 2023, 2022. We are the reason Joe Biden is president. Young voters of color, suburban women, like that is the coalition, right? And I think, I think that if Joe Biden were to step back, Kamala Harris were to be the candidate, I think it would be beneficial. I think it would. I think that it is possible that she outperforms what Biden is. And I'm sorry I didn't have this already up. I should have been able to put it earlier, but let's see if I can pull up the perceptions of voters with regards to Kamala Harris polling. But last I had seen, she outperformed Biden in the polling. But that doesn't mean that she win. It means that it's closer. Okay, so as of July 6th, so 2 days ago, it would be Trump 45, Harris 40. It'd be Trump 45.3, Harris 42.6. So it's not great, but it's within the margin of error. And that's closer than what Biden is. Here we have, as of July 6th, so I stand corrected. It is still very close, but Trump 44, Biden 42.7. It's not good on either front. It's not good on either front. But it is what it is. And it's upsetting. It sucks. It's hard to not have a concrete answer. It's hard to go into election against a near bona fide fascist with somebody that doesn't seem to be at the top of his game. But I think this thing will shake out. We'll see coming days how it will roll. Hopefully, don't get a second Biden, a second Trump presidency. I'll leave this section with a little bit of classic stupidity with Tommy Lahren, our favorite right-wing contributor. He says, quote, "I'm going to go out on a limb here and say the Democrats aren't as worried about Joe as they should be because they're banking on millions of illegal voting." Now, of course, I don't think I have to explain this to everybody that's listening, but undocumented immigrants can't vote. Citizens can only. And there's absolutely 0.000000000% evidence that undocumented immigrants are voting, let alone are they voting for Democrats. But they will continue to be stupid and xenophobic and racist and make shit up, and nobody cares because they can just say things that are fake. Nobody cares. Because again, that is another story that hasn't been talked about, but former president, the failed, the 4 times indicted, 1 time convicted felon, the civilly liable rapist, Donald Trump, the wannabe dictator, lied so many times that it's fact checkable. It is such a gish gallop of bullshit that you can't even fact check it. at least not in real time. It is so much, it's a fire hose of garbage spewing. And that is what we're going against. I want to finalize here, finish up, is something that just, it goes, I can't show you guys the whole article because I ran out of my capacity here, but Millennials and Generation Z have given up on finding fulfillment at work, as survey finds they're the least likely to care about enjoying. So, why is this important? Why do I feel like that is not surprising? And what can we do about it? What do we interpret from it? So, first things first, yeah, Millennials and Generation Z are not fulfilled at work because one, our pay is too low to justify the cost of living. Number two, the American dream is not dead, but it is being snatched from, being taken from us. It is being locked up with a key by the older generation. Maybe some of them aren't doing it on purpose, but some definitely are, with the control of the labor power, which we alluded to earlier, but also the controls and the keys to the environment, which is, or the, not the environment, but although the environment's important, the economy. Jobs that used to be for the average Joe now require a bachelor's degree. Jobs that used to require a bachelor's degree require a master's degree. If you have those degrees, you have loan debt. If you have student loan debt, you can't buy a house. If you can't buy a house, it's harder to start a family. If you can't buy a house and start a family, you might be living at home. If you're living at home, it'll be harder to date people. People are then going through suffering with depression, anxiety, all of these things are real. That is boiled down to the core of especially millennials, but Gen Z's problem as well, in my opinion, right? And so much of the identity of the boomer generation came from their jobs and their careers. But the employer-employee contract, the idea and the concept of a career where you have one job, you work for one company for your life, has been broken long ago, long before I even entered the work. And that's unfortunate. Now, I'm pretty good with my job. I'm pretty happy with that. But not everybody is, right? And I got to be honest with you, my other jobs before it, I didn't like as much, right? So that's harder to justify. It's hard to digest and sit with it and be complacent and be like, yes, this is it. This is good. I can do this for 50, 60 years of my life. And because we have to do that for 50 or 60 years of our life because the retirement age keeps going up, is unfortunate, but it is the reality, right? So, millennials and Generation Z, I am begging you, I am imploring you to get engaged, get involved, do something outside of what your job is. That, as this study is suggesting, not where we're finding our happiness, not where we're finding our fulfillment. Get hobbies, get involved with the community, find groups. Somebody asked me the other day, and again, I won't say names, but this kind of spurred me to come back. This said, how can I get more involved? What can I do? I care about what my kids, the future for my kids is gonna look. I said, pick an issue, find a group, find a nonprofit, and get involved there. If you're not overtly political, I'm not going to start you there. But start with something you care about. Very easy. And then you connect to somebody. You find that sense of community. If it's a church, if it's a Magic the Gathering group, right? Like that I go play Magic the Gathering on Wednesday nights, right? And that's something that allows me to de-stress. Like any of this sort of community is good because then you can see, hear, and engage with other people, learn from their situations, gain empathy for the situations, and understand, hey, this person's suffering with the same thing that I am. This person is dealing with the same problems that I am. They're dealing with isolation and anxiety problems. I get that. Hey, you know what? Maybe we hang out more than outside this, Wednesday nights. We on Saturdays we're gonna go and we're gonna go organize around this issue. We're gonna go advocate for mental health. I've it's one of those things where I'll dissect it from some of my real life issues or complaints about certain people that don't actually go and do certain things when they just want to complain about it online. That's is what it is. But like a real issue is men's mental health, and something that I wasn't on here during June, but that is a real thing, right? Like people don't take seriously the mental health of men, and it's one of those things that like, oh, when people say that, they're like, oh yeah, like, oh, who cares? Yeah, men are trash, whatever. It's a real issue. And when people are cast aside, you might not think that this is a problem, but it actually radicalizes them in a political sense. It might not be a political issue, but it makes them political actors. Everything is political in its core. And that why, if you can get engaged and get involved with people that just are normies, they don't care about politics per se, but you can say, hey, like, we care about animals, right? I'll use Loki, my puppy, right? We care about animals. Like we want to help make sure that there's dogs get rescued, they have food, they get the surgeries that they need, etc. Like get involved with that. And then you develop the connections and make the difference happen. The fulfillment comes from that. And change comes from that. Change does not come from the keyboard, although it can maybe if you're the most radical and inspiring of writers, right? But it comes from action. It comes from community. It comes from support. It comes from empathy. It comes from a connection with others. And I definitely see it, the board that I'm on with Nami, but I see it all the time. And I see it with like, whether it's a book club, it's a Dungeons and Dragons group, if it's anything, right? Like there's so many ways that you can connect with people. And then I've become closer with people from like school or, like I said, my book club. And I talk to these people and they tell me their problems because they feel comfortable talking to me. And maybe they don't want me to fix them. Maybe they don't care, right? Maybe they just want somebody to talk to and let it out on and like be heard. Be that person. Because that is how we can break this. Gen Z and millennials are just lazy. They don't want to work. They're whatever. Blah 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 blah. Because we know that's not true, but we just want our fair shot. We want our fair shake. We want to get the opportunity that our ancestors had, our parents, grandparents, great grandparents had. We want the American dream, and I keep saying this. I've said this 1,000 times over. We want the American dream. That is what is owed to us. We can get it. We can still achieve those things. I believe it. You have to believe it. So hopefully that leaves you on a little bit more of an up note beat than discussing the current political system president, but if not, that's okay too. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me and listening to this episode of the Greater Society podcast. It's been a little while. I'm a little rusty for sure, but more I feel inclined to do this. I hope hang around. As I said earlier, the biggest driver of what I want to do right now is got on TikTok. So if you can go over to my TikTok at Connor OHanlon, that would be awesome. Follow it there. Stay tuned for my book. You can sign up for my Substack at substack.com/@ gotta have the @ symbol, Connor OHanlon. There you will be able to subscribe to the Substack. You will get updates about my book, which you will also soon be getting updates about the cover of my book. I am having the cover design this week. the discussions around that, and I will ask you guys on my Substack for help or revisions. So if you guys like a certain thing, you don't like a certain thing, that would be awesome. So go on the Substack, hit that subscribe. It is free, 100% free, and this will allow us to connect and engage on a different level. You can always go to the Discord server, which is linked, and subscribe here on YouTube, etc. Follow me on Instagram and on Twitter. My Twitter is at Connor OHanlon. My Instagram is at Con_OHanlon, or you can follow the show, which I won't be posting on as much on that page. I'm trying to build out my personal branding. So go on to my Instagram, you can follow it there, and I'll follow you back. So, all that being said, thank you guys so much for hanging out. You guys are listening on anywhere, the Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Thank you. And if you guys would like to listen to there, you can find that on any of the Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, any of these places by just looking up the Greater Society Podcast. With all of that being said, thank you so much. It's been a long time. And until next time, peace.